Welcome everybody to another episode of Building Better Business Relationships. And today I'm so happy we're with my good friend, Christine West, and she is the Business MD. Christine, thank you for joining us.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here, Brenda. It's so exciting to see you again, my Canadian neighbor from Alaska.
Absolutely. So Christine is joining us all the way from Alaska.
Yeah.
So they always ask us here in Canada, Christine, have you got snow there yet?
Not yet, but it's definitely coming because it's been raining and raining and raining. And I will tell you, I think I'm going to have to turn on the heat probably tonight.
Ah, okay. Well, we've still got the air conditioning on, so I think I'll stay here for now.
Lucky you.
But let's dive right into this and let's help all of my viewers get to know you a little bit better. So,
Awesome.
Christine, tell us, what is it that you do?
I call myself a people strategist because the simplicity, well, it's not so simple, but I solve complex human challenges. So that could be in workplace or that could be at home or in life in general, because most of the business issues are people. So I specialize in emotional intelligence, human behavior, and communication. So it's really about your approach, how you navigate through the challenges, whether you're a leader, an entrepreneur, or a salesperson.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. Is that what, have you done this all your life?
No, this is my second career, and my business was really inspired by when I used to work in corporate and when I worked in the tech field and I worked in sales. And when things were going good, everything was great. The company rewarded you, but then all of a sudden, somebody at the very tippy top of the corporation would make some type of a decision that affected you down at the bottom, and all of a sudden, all craziness broke out. And if people didn't know how to navigate through differences or conflicts or chaos, that's when things got crazy, or even with the customers. And so, just for viewers, context, I was on the inside of IBM in the early 90s when it crumbled. I was also the late 90s. I was also on the inside of Cisco systems when it crumbled, when the tech stocks plummeted. So I know firsthand what it's like when humans, the human side, is not, doesn't know how to solve its own issues.
Wow. And that must be a pretty scary place to be, both for the people who don't really know, people down at the bottom who don't know what's happening, and for the people at the top who do know what's happening. It must be scary for both of them.
I would think, but I would also, from my experience, I never got the pleasure of, being able to, interview or ask the people on the top, why did you make that decision? History has shown us, back in the early 90s, the world could have been different if IBM said, hey, people do want personal computing, which we obviously know we do. And it wasn't, the visionaries of Bill Gates and then also Steve Jobs that said, "Hey, people want personal computing." It was IBM that said, "No, they want the mainframe. They want AS400s." And so the proof is here. Here we are on Zoom, personal computing. So I think it was just more of an argument of the egos of, the top dogs. In the case of Cisco, and this really has to do with looking at entrepreneurship, was Cisco was great from the technology, a great company to work for, except for they kept acquiring, 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 and never integrating properly. And then the perception of their stock was overrated by a penny. And then things went, and it was insane.
Wow. Wow. Well,
Yeah. So, yeah. So when all of a sudden things are going great and your best buddies one day with so many people would then all of a sudden, when lots of people that were very wealthy on paper all of a sudden weren't, things get ugly, things get emotional. So that's some of my inspiration behind why I focus so much on the human side. And even in smaller scale business, it's still so crucially important. If you don't know how to navigate through your own inner world and also navigate through the world of the humans you interact with and count on you, then you can get yourself in some deep doo-doo.
So, how do we take that big scale picture and
Uh-huh.
apply it to a solopreneur or an entrepreneur who maybe has a team of, if they're lucky, they have a team of five?
Sure. And that's more like who my client is today. How you apply it is you're a business owner. Let's take the solo entrepreneur, for example. Okay, you're the solo entrepreneur. You're probably part of networking groups, whether it's on Zoom or in person, and you're meeting people and you have something valuable to you that you want to bring to market and you want people to know about it. So people need to be able to understand the words out of your mouth. They need to have buy-in. So every little step that you go down the road of the moment you say hello to this is who I am to this is what I do. If you're one of those people that, for example, everybody has experiences at some version of this, whether it's virtual or in person, in-person example is I've been to conferences, entrepreneur conferences. You're standing around mingling with a bunch of folks. And there's that one person with their flyer saying, "Here, come to my thing." And everybody looks at them as though, wait a minute, you just interrupted our great conversation. And the person's really pushing that flyer and nobody wants it. And to the degree of just to shut them up, you grab it and you end up throwing it in the garbage because that entrepreneur didn't take the time to read the room or understand that there's a conversation, to read the emotions that take place of how people socialize and mingle. So let's take an example of the virtual networking. That entrepreneur, you get into a networking room and they're already, hey, this is what I do, this is what I want you to buy. Okay, I'm the best at this and I need you to buy this because you need this and I know what you need and blah 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 blah. It's usually a turnoff to most people. You don't even know me, you
Wonder
don't know what
how
I need.
what makes them think that they know what we need.
Exactly. So now let's take the person who's leading a five-person team. If you never ask your team, like you hire, okay, you're great on paper, and I bring you into my business and I want you to do this, that, and the other, and I want you to follow my lead. And I don't even know how to lead you or communicate, or you bring something to me. So, for example, I'll use like real life examples of customers that I support where they get stuck because all of a sudden their customer gets mad at them for something because they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to read the customer's emotions. And then all of a sudden, business owner of the leader of five, if their attitude is, well, that customer is such a big pain in the butt, we don't need them anyways. Well, to me, that's wrong attitude. For me in my service, it's no, let's have that tough conversation and let's find out what's really going on and find out how we can keep your customer and then understand what it is that they really have your head on a chopping block for. And I can say about 99% of the time, my ways are effective through that. And I say 99% because there's always is that 1% of where somebody's just done. But usually, like in the case of, somebody makes a service change, it's because usually that the small business, they want to hire internally for that job. So in the small business, it's far more of looking at it. How do we communicate? The leader, how to be a better leader, how to read my team, how to read my customer, how to really understand. I don't claim to be like this marketing expert, but I'm actually a little bit better at it than sometimes I give myself credit for Because if you know how to read the emotional landscape and if you know how to communicate with people and not be that person, say on social media, that's, spamming everybody in the world, that is, cut and paste and saying, hey, I want you to come to this, come to my, this or that, buy for me. I know what you need. To me, those are mistakes. So those are a few examples. And I know I've given you kind of a lot, but
So
there's a lot to it with dealing with people.
so a couple of kind of scenarios for you.
Yeah.
One would be I think one of the first people that a lot of entrepreneurs bring into their business is somebody convinces them they need a virtual assistant.
Yep.
But they're working on a budget, so
Yep.
they go online and they look for the least expensive virtual assistants that they can find. And oftentimes, those least expensive virtual assistants are coming to them from another country in another time zone with a totally different culture for how you work and what you do and what you say and what's acceptable. And then they come in, they join my team, and I say, I want you to handle my social media. And they say, oh, we know all about social media. We can definitely handle your social media. I say, okay, I want a post to go out every day. And I forget to say something that I think, and I would love your opinion on this, but that I think is very important. I forget to say, but I want to approve the posts before you send them out.
Absolutely.
So they start creating posts and they start putting them out on my social media. And all of a sudden, I'm either attracting people that are not the people that I want to attract, or even worse, I'm repelling the people that I really want to attract.
Yep.
Can you help with that?
Yes. Yes. I help my small business team customers recruit the right people, but also deal with the cultural layout of, is this person a good fit and how do you communicate with them? And here's something that, as I was listening to your story there, this is a real story. This is something that I'll share that I think is important about, so, something about me for people to get to know me a little bit. I recently outsourced my website because it's something that I needed to do. And I saw some, ad in like your example of it was somebody that is not in the US, but they do keep US hours. But here's what's interesting about this story is they had, a lot of the right things in place where a lot of tools for a lot of entrepreneurs, and they weren't used to, what we discovered was they weren't used to somebody like me who, one, has a tech background. Number two, isn't afraid of tech. But number three, that is an extremely articulate communicator. And so, anyways, what they did was they went through this process of, generalize, fill out these forms about what you want. And they said originally it would, take about 30 minutes. Well, because I'm so articulate about things in specific, it took me about 4 hours to fill out their forms because I was being very specific. And I gave them lots of examples and this and that. And then all of a sudden we got on our review call of, me, of, them releasing their website. Now, I originally liked their design, but their content, I literally cringed. I literally was, I was like, oh my God, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. And so, and then I was kicking myself, okay, I want this to work. I have to figure out how this is going to work because they're in my budget. And what's the number one? And I thought about it. I'm like, what is the number one importance to me? Number one, they need to be able to work with me and they need to be able to take accountability for things. Because if they're going to serve me, so one of the things that they did that irritated me was, as I shared, my expertise is in communication and emotional intelligence. They literally took ChatGPT and wrote an emotional intelligence article that was so embarrassing to me. And in the way that they made me sound, because it was for SEO. And it was horrible, horrible. And so I'm going through their process of, getting requesting changes, this and that, and I felt I wasn't getting hurt. But this is what was really magical about this relationship was, and they're still my provider. This is what was so interesting was literally because they were running all these ads, beautiful social media ads. And the pictures they were using that I mean, I provided them a lot of my own personal pictures of my business, and some of the pictures that I use that they were using, I don't even know where they came up with these pictures. They made me sound like a corporate bore, like corporate wallpaper. And I'm so far from that. And so literally, every time I would see their ads going through Facebook, I actually wrote and I said, "That's really a beautiful ad, except for you don't produce websites that way." Because my website is a pure example of that. And I'm still waiting for somebody actually to, and I wrote this whole articulation. And then I even saw they had all these wonderful reviews on Trustpilot. I wrote the most articulate detail of a one-star review while I was still in my grace period. This is what's really interesting about all my articulation of communication. This is why they're still my vendor. It escalated all the way up to their top dog. And they actually wrote me privately. They're like, "You are the most articulate person that we've ever experienced in our life." And they wrote on Trustpilot, they didn't delete it, they weren't hiding it. They literally wrote and they said, "We thank you for teaching us how to do better. We're just not accustomed to somebody like you." And and I said, "Well, I'm not accustomed to somebody like you guys either. So how can we work this out?" And so through my skills of dealing with that, I mean, yes, I was emotionally exasperated, but at the same time, I said, "I'm going to figure this out. If they can't make it work, they'll give me a refund." And they took responsibility. And I even said to them, "Because you take responsibility and accountability, that I can work with."
So
And
I
as
guess
long, yeah,
So I
yeah.
guess those
So,
are two, you're dropped a gold nugget here. Those are
yeah,
two really big keys when you're working with somebody. If you drop the ball, if you make a mistake, if they point out to you something that they don't like, you have to be accountable for what you did, be accountable for your actions, and take
yeah,
responsibility.
yeah, exactly. So the relationship now that they've taught me how to work with them and I've taught them how to work with me, there's a lot of customization. Like, for example, there's certain things that I'll have them do. There's things that I've requested, okay, this I have to write all my content because you don't know how to mimic my voice and I don't expect you to. That's me. But there are certain things design wise that I want to customize and I want it to look this way. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs aren't going to be asking for this because they don't even know about these tools. You have your set tools, but as long as you're willing to customize for me, I'll still be your customer. And they actually love that I have given them a challenge. And me even showing them certain things, they were, "I don't even know who wrote this. I don't even know who wrote this." And me asking, "Does this even make sense to you?" And like take me out of this picture of my expertise. Just read this and does it make sense? And even when I actually sent them I instructed them to go watch some of my reels, and they came back to me, they said, "Yes, we see your point. We see your point based on who you are and based on how we're portraying you." And it wasn't just the cop out of like, we're sorry, this is, this is the this is the range of what we can do. It was, we're willing to be accountable and we're willing to let you know what's in the range of what we can do. And we're willing to expand this because we want it to work too.
So the idea that the customer is always right is an important one, and it is actually a true thing to keep in mind.
Yes, but the point of me sharing all of that is that there was a true navigation of my skills of having to communicate and articulate and to work through this, but also them as receivers being willing
So on the
to
on the customer end, you can't just say this is garbage, I hate it.
correct, correct. So how I can help specifically with that story is I can help you to articulate what's specific. It is, you hire that virtual assistant. Half the battle is being able to communicate so they understand what you expect. Most business owners, solo entrepreneurs, think that everybody is the same. It's the same thing when I see folks say, "I need a life coach." Well, I don't even know okay, what are you trying to solve? And saying something such as so and so is a great life coach. That is so vague because maybe you're going through life challenge, like, okay, maybe you're somebody that is a life coach that deals with women who just went through a recent divorce and still have resentment. That's specific versus a life coach that says, hey, you know what, I deal with um, moms who are single moms and have kids that are under the age of 10. That's a different skill set.
So that brings us actually to a very important question. Who are your ideal clients? Who is it? Who's your perfect skill set?
My perfect skill set is that entrepreneur, whether it's a solo entrepreneur, the small business owner, uh, that they're a leader, they're looking to sell something, but they are really talented in what they do, but they're really tripped up by emotions and communication.
Beautiful. And how did you choose this kind of work? How did you choose to do this? Like, why is this your perfect work, your perfect business over all the other things you could have chosen to do, especially coming out of such big corporate?
Well, okay, so I will tell, part of the brief story here is I, when I was in corporate back in 2001, something magical about that year because I didn't live in Alaska at the time. And I was getting around March of 2001 when the tech stocks went and all the chaos was going on. I realized something that the corporate marching orders to keep selling, for something inside of me said, I can't sell this anymore. I have a consciousness. My growing consciousness of selling things that people don't need is starting to grow on me. And I realized also that since I was no longer really buying into the corporate Kool-Aid, I'll just put it that way. And when and then there were certain things that were going on in my personal life because that I wasn't paying attention to because I was so subscribed to the corporate Kool-Aid. And I didn't know how to solve any of this. It just wasn't part of my upbringing. I didn't come from a family that we spoke about emotions. I was literally having a breakdown because I didn't know how to solve anything. And I didn't know how to talk to people about it. I didn't know how to be vulnerable. I didn't know because how I was raised, if you did that, then there was something wrong with you. and and that would be shame and embarrassment and all that good stuff. So I did what I did do best I was a great strategic avoider. And so my strategic avoidance literally got me to go to a medical doctor to write a leave, long-term leave to take a pause so I can figure this out. Because I subscribed at that time solved problems. And so the medical doctor wrote the note based on asking me some emotional questions, such as, do you got stress, anxiety? And I didn't even know what these words meant. But my part of my plan was, sure, I got that. Yeah, okay, write the note. So she writes the note, and then the first month of me doing nothing solved nothing. I didn't deal with my personal life. I didn't deal with my professional life. I just stared out the window, sitting on the sofa, like la 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 la, taking anti-anxiety pills and thinking the pill's going to solve my problem. Until a friend came over and just said, "Get off your ass and get off the couch." And I was like, "And do what?" And he said, "Go to Alaska." So this intrigued me. And the funk that I was in, I didn't want to do anything tame, like go on a cruise or anything like that, because that would have been too tame for me. So I did a Google search on adventure in Alaska. And the adventure that came up was a beginning mountaineering course. And I called them up, and I've always been an outdoor play girl. I like playing outside. So I called them up and I said, "Well, what do I got to do?" And they said, "You got to be emotionally fit, physically fit, and mentally fit." And I fibbed and I said, "Sure." So then I said, "Well, okay, my conditions are, will my cell phone work?" And they said, "Nope, your cell phone doesn't work on a glacier." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, and then the second question is, when I start kicking and screaming and I don't want to do this activity anymore, are you going to let me quit?" And they said, "Nope, you're committed, you're committed." I'm like, exactly what I want. So, and so I pay them and I go back in the living room and I share with my friend, "Great idea. I'm going mountaineering now." And so he's sitting there, uh, couch, mountaineering. Like, yeah, you got to go buy all this stuff for me because I have to have all this equipment. And he's sitting there with me. "Do you understand what you're doing?" I'm like, "No, I've skied in the Rockies before." And he's like, "You're not going skiing in the Rockies, you're going mountain climbing." And I'm like, "Cool, I'm going mountain climbing." Now, it still doesn't register what I'm doing because in my brain, I am thinking I throw money at it. This is what's going to happen. So, anyways, fast forward, I get to Alaska. I show up, and I don't blame anybody in Alaska back then making fun of me. I would make fun of me if I saw me in the summer of 2021 of how I showed up first in Alaska. I would, based on who I am now. And so, anyways, 7 days out on this glacier, a lot of things happened, but what's more important to answer the question, and this, the background was important, was when I was in base camp by myself waiting for the commuter plane after climbing a mountain, doing all these activities, and I was all by myself, and I actually was sitting there and I didn't know when the commuter plane was going to come. I had no clue. All I knew was I'm the only woman alive. If the team never came back to camp, I don't know. I didn't have a radio. I just trusted what was going to happen. Then all of a sudden, I something in the sky, I can hear like the voice of God. And in my consciousness, I was risen above in my consciousness about how I can solve all my human challenges in a nanosecond. And I was like, "Whoa, that's cool. That's really cool." And and God's talking to me and showing me this is my divine calling and giving me a glimpse. And but then the free will was, is this what you want to do? And so me being a little cocky back then and asking questions and said, "Well, what do I got to do?" And God said, "You just got to follow my lead and give up your old life." And I'm like, "Well, if I don't want to do it?" He says, "You don't have to do it. You just go back to what you know." And so I'm sitting there. There was no pressure. I asked a few more questions. I kept journaling, journaling, journaling. And then all of a sudden, I was like, well, what I gotta do? God said, well, all you gotta do is say yes to me and follow my lead. And I shouted out, yes. And the conversation was over, and the commuter plane came. And I could never get it out of my head. And I realized the magic that now this new superpower I had was I I realized that I was different than when it wasn't like magic fairy dust. I could my perception of how things how what was problematic was no longer a problem. And my attitude towards all these things that I thought were problematic were no longer a problem. So so when I went back to Chicago, I realized that the moment I walked in my door in Chicago, I knew I outgrew the place. And all I kept thinking was Alaska and this new business. And but I knew I had a lot of stuff to clean up where I needed to get out of this relationship that I was in. I needed to not just argue with this guy that I was with, argue with my husband. I needed to divorce him. Just, I needed to sell properties. I needed to complete, when I went back to the corporation, I realized that I was no longer fit. I wasn't fitting in anymore. And so my focus started back then. And then I realized the challenges at that time, I was just navigating through them. Now, it wasn't just that moment. I mean, it was obviously over the years, I needed to learn new skills and I needed to face different challenges, which I have over, the years. But that was the beginnings. And that's why I was instructed by God to focus on the human network of all the different things. And I guess God chose me because I was such a novice at it. And just to prove that you don't have to come from a family of great communicators, because it wouldn't have been such a problem for me. I was I back past me, past versions was a person who just I didn't understand emotions. I didn't understand the value of how to communicate through things. So that's how I got here.
Amazing, amazing. So why why are you the perfect person to solve those ideal clients' problems?
I'll
Why
tell
we're
you
going to tell
why.
them why they should choose you.
If you're looking for someone who won't judge you, number one. Number two, will find a way to turn the impossible to possible, but also whether I'm hired as a consultant or the pure strategist, no matter what the environment is, complex, the word complex is your complex, not my complex. As so I will get you to the possible place, but the thing also about me, I'm a fighter, but I also fight fair. And I'm also somebody who understands that I'm willing to have conversations that very few are willing to. And I don't get emotionally triggered by if somebody says something that, all kinds of crazy stuff. Like an example. Um, one time I was giving a training for a client and some, notorious that one person always walks in late, comes in and starts accusing me of not knowing, that I was talking about topics that she already knew and blah blah blah. And I was okay, great. But by the end of the training, I won her over because I was steadfast. So choosing me is if you want somebody who will fight the battle with you. But when I use the word fight, I mean that I fight with love. I'm willing to do things that are tough and navigate and say things that need to be said. And I'm also willing to, sometimes people just got to vent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes people just got to get it out.
So I have another scenario for you, Christine.
Yeah.
What about oftentimes when we're solopreneurs, when we're entrepreneurs starting out, we find ourselves bringing our family members in to fill jobs, and maybe they're not family, not jobs that they were originally not their ideal job. They're filling a hole because the hole needs to be filled, but it's not their perfect match. How do we navigate that without losing our mind or without ruining our friends, our relationship with our family members?
Well, even more so, that's why your folks need to come to the master class next week. Uh, but to give you a little more specific answer, part of um, part of what I'll be speaking about in the master class, it's called, you're doing everything right, so are you still stuck? And we're going to be focusing on the hidden family dynamics that block your value, your visibility, your voice. So part of it is knowing who you are and what you stand for, but it doesn't mean that with your family members, it's something family family sometimes is the tougher, dynamic, but it's not impossible. And I'll disclose this. I'm laughing about what I'm about to share. In my early years, I remember firing my own mother. And I'll tell you why I fired my mother. Because I was going back and forth between Alaska and Chicago, and I was doing in-person workshops. And I asked my mother to be the front desk, person to check people in. And there was a few people who just stopped in that were, all she had to do was take their name, their contact information, and just take whatever the fee was. And then my mother was deciding who could come into my workshop and who couldn't without asking me
Oh,
because she didn't know the person. They were a stranger to her.
wow.
So,
I can
uh,
I can see where that might draw up some rather heavy emotions on both sides because mom was probably trying to help you and keep you safe, and you
yes.
were trying to build a business and make some money.
Yeah. So mom's never been an entrepreneur. All I wanted her to do was do this one job, and her opinions could have been her own silent opinions, but they had nothing to do with my mother. Like a lot of mothers, she thought she was protecting me, keeping me safe by meddling.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, how do you handle it? Back to your question, sometimes you do need to fire, your family members because they're not necessarily qualified.
So in your workshop is one of the things that you talk about how to fire with love?
We could, yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Sometimes you got to fire with love. Sometimes people are, sometimes what happens, Brenda, and I mean this sincerely, and this is for every entrepreneur, solopreneur, or small business owner. We get comfortable with people and we get comfortable with our families, just like I did. I needed somebody at the front desk. I needed somebody to check people in. I couldn't do both. I needed to prepare. My mother was available. She wanted to help me. So she said. Back then, I wasn't as brilliant of a communicator as I am today, as articulate. And my mother was the one human being that she was really, really dynamite about triggering me. She was really good. And one of the things I remember that workshop that my part of having clear boundaries when you're in business and having explained to my mother that this is my business. This is how I'm paying my bills. Unless you're going to be an investor and unless you're going to fund this, then you're an employee. You're an on-call employee. My mother did not like my framework, so she was like, good, fire me. And I was like, okay, you're fired. But also during that workshop, it was interesting. My mother was somebody I laughed because this is actually funny to me. Is my mother literally got in front of the whole audience and said, I have a question. I said, okay. She's, how do I get my daughter to do blah, blah, blah? And I said, okay, this is really a great question for the professional right now. This is how I would recommend you communicate with your daughter. So sometimes that loving act, but you also have to recognize just like anybody else you're hiring, the virtual assistant, the marketing firm, the coach. What are you hiring them for? Are you just hiring a body just to do whatever they feel like? Well, then you have crazy making your own business. Are you hiring your best friend? Sometimes your best friends are your best friends because you have fun with them and you do dumb things with them, when you're not working. But they may not be the best person to be your front line.
And for those watching, if you would like to learn more about how to communicate with your best friend when you get them into that role and they're assuming a role and they're doing what they think is best in your business, come on
Yep.
into Christine's workshop and you can ask her yourself at the workshop. So
Yeah.
Christine, we're gonna move along, and
Okay.
for anybody who sees this after the workshop is over, if you would like a copy of the video from the workshop, you simply reach out to Christine or myself, and we will make arrangements to get you a copy of the workshop video. And if you've never met Christine and you want to know what she taught, you reach out to me. I'll get you a copy of the video, but not only that, we do an introduction directly to the speaker. So you will get an introduction to Christine and still have an opportunity to ask your questions, even though you weren't there in the room. So, Christine, we have one final question. And this question isn't so much about your business itself. This is a question that speaks to my community because, as you know, my mission is to ensure that no entrepreneur is left behind. No entrepreneur quits before they experience their first miracle. And one of the ways that I'm trying to do this is by showing people examples of what they could hope for. So, my final question for you is, what is one thing that has happened for you as an entrepreneur that you think never would have happened if you'd stayed with corporate America?
Wow, that's a great question, Brenda. So many things. I personally believe that your business is the greatest personal development tool alive. So for me, the miracle, if I didn't leave corporate America, I would never get to know who authentic me is.
There's another new answer for the books.
Yeah.
So, if you're not sure about how you get to know who authentic you is, then you need to definitely connect with Christine. If you would
Yeah.
like to get to know Christine better, if you would like to know how she helps, more about how she helps people and see whether she could, in fact, help you in your business, then simply reach out to me, connect with me. We're going to put links to Christine's website and to the whatever ways that Christine is most comfortable with being contacted, whatever social media she is most popular on. I am hoping that one of those social media will be LinkedIn because of my personal love for LinkedIn, but we will include the ways that you could reach out to Christine. And if you would like a personalized introduction, Christine is a good friend of mine. I will be
Yeah.
happy to introduce you and just reach out to me. So, Christine, thank you for your time today. I look forward to seeing you next week. For people who are seeing this after it's over, reach out to us if you want to know what you missed. We don't want you suffering from FOMO.
Well, thank you, my friend Brenda, and I look forward to meeting lots of great people who are connected with Brenda. And let's connect. Let's get to know you. Let's get you the help you need, whether it's me or somebody else. But let's do it.
Awesome. Awesome. And I have a feeling that if Christine is not the help that you need, that she will be able to help you to gain clarity on what kind of help it actually is that you
Yep,
need.
absolutely. That's just half the step. Once you're clear.
Okay. So, Brenda Marie Sheldrake, Biz Leads Expert at Biz Leads Expert, helping you to create leads that last and clients that stick. Today, we've been talking to Christine West, the business MD, all the way from
Alaska.
Alaska. And next time, join us next time to see where we're going next and who we're meeting next. Have a good day.